This is the Tom Bigby Tales, and I'm your host, Shannon Evans. I write about a small town in northeast Mississippi called Columbus, and sometimes I write about the rest of the state. We're in the middle of our annual spring pilgrimage here in Columbus, and one of the things we refer to in our pilgrimage is how some of the homes were used as hospitals after the Battle of Shiloh and Corinth. This episode is titled Columbus, Mississippi, a Haven for the Wounded in 1862. In the tumultuous spring of 1862, the entire town of Columbus found itself unexpectedly thrust into a pivotal role during the American Civil War. As the devastating battles of Corinth and Shiloh raged nearby, Columbus transformed practically overnight in an impromptu hospital town. Its citizens, both white and black, free and enslaved, rose to meet the monumental challenge of caring for thousands of wounded and dying soldiers that were anticipated to be arriving from both sides of the conflict, which the battlefield was a little over 100 miles away. On April 6th and 7th, 1862, the Battle of Shiloh erupted in southwestern Tennessee, marking a turning point in the Western theater of the Civil War. This devastating engagement resulted in over 23,000 casualties, shocking both the Union and Confederacy with its unprecedented violence. The battle began when Confederate forces under General Albert Sidney Johnston launched a surprise attack on Union troops led by General Ulysses S. Grant near Pittsburgh Landing. The fighting was intense and chaotic, with the terrain of Shiloh, its woods, fields, and deep ravines playing a crucial role in the ebb and flow of the battle. One soldier, Private Sam Watkins of the 1st Tennessee Infantry, described the scene. The woods seemed to be alive with the enemy. The undergrowth of the forest was so thick and the smoke so dense that it was almost impossible to see 20 yards in any direction. This confusion led to many instances of friendly fire and contributed to the high casualty rate. By the end of the first day, the Confederates had pushed the Union forces back to the Tennessee River, but at a terrible cost, including the death of General Johnston. His loss was keenly felt by the Confederate Army. As one officer noted, when Johnston fell, it was as if the heart was torn from our cause. The arrival of Union reinforcements overnight turned the tide, and by the afternoon of April 7th, the Confederates were in retreat. General Grant later wrote, "I saw an open field in our possession on the second day, over which the Confederates had made repeated charges the day before, so covered with dead that it would have been possible to walk across the clearing in any direction, stepping on dead bodies without a foot touching the ground." Following the bloodbath at Shiloh, Union forces under General Henry Halleck advanced on the strategically vital railroad junction of Corinth, Mississippi. The siege lasted from April 29th to May 30th, 1862. While casualties were lower than at Shiloh, disease ran rampant through both armies due to poor sanitation and contaminated water supplies. Corinth's importance lay at the intersection of two major railroads, the Memphis and Charleston, and the Mobile and Ohio. Control of this junction would give the Union a significant strategic advantage in the Western theater. As one Union officer wrote, "Corinth is the vertebra of the Confederacy. Once broken, the rebellion will be cut in twain." The Confederate forces, now under the command of General P.G.T. Beauregard, eventually withdrew from Corinth under the cover of night, leaving the Union in control of this crucial transportation hub. Beauregard employed a cleaver ruse during the withdrawal, ordering his men to cheer loudly at regular intervals, fooling the Union forces into believing reinforcements were arriving. One Union soldier wrote in his diary, "All night long we could hear the rebels cheering. We thought they must be getting reinforced, but come morning they were gone like ghosts." As news of the battles reached Columbus, located about 100 miles southeast of Corinth, the town's residents sprang into action. Public buildings, churches, and private homes were quickly converted into makeshift hospitals. The town's population of roughly 6,000 found itself caring for many wounded and sick soldiers. The Columbus Female Institute, a prestigious girls' school, became one of the largest hospitals. Its spacious rooms and wide hallways were ideal for housing patients, while its expansive grounds provided space for convalescents. Other significant makeshift hospitals included private homes like the Colonnade and several of the town's churches. St. Paul's Episcopal Church saw its pews removed and replaced with rows of cots. Columbus's citizens, particularly its women, played a crucial role in tending to the injured. They volunteered as nurses, cooked meals, washed linens, and provided comfort to the dying. This outpouring of compassion crossed lines of class and at times even allegiance. One notable figure was Caroline Seabury, a former teacher from the Female Institute who volunteered tirelessly at the makeshift hospitals. Her diary provides a poignant account of the struggles caring for the wounded. She wrote of long nights spent by those changing bandages, comforting delirious patients, and writing letters for those too weak to hold a pen. African Americans, both enslaved and free, also played a significant role in the care of the wounded. They worked as orderlies, cooks, and laundresses, often exposed to the same diseases and horrific sights as other caregivers. The sheer number of patients overwhelmed Columbus's impromptu medical facilities. Sanitation quickly became a critical issue, with waste and contaminated materials accumulating faster than they could be properly disposed of. The warm, humid Mississippi climate in late spring and early summer provided an ideal breeding ground for disease-carrying insects and bacteria. Dr. James Calhoun, physician, wrote in his memoirs about the horrors of such hospitals. The stench of gangrene and excrement hung heavy in the air. We did what we could to maintain cleanliness, but it was a losing battle against the sheer volume of human misery pouring into our town. While many soldiers arrived with bullet and shrapnel wounds, it was often disease that proved most deadly. Common killers include dysentery, often called the bloody flux. This intestinal infection caused severe diarrhea and dehydration. It spread rapidly in the unsanitary conditions of both army camps and makeshift hospitals. Typhoid fever was a bacterial infection spread through contaminated food and water and causes high fever, abdominal pain, and often delirium. It was particularly deadly, with a mortality rate of about 25% among those infected. A doctor during the war wrote, "The typhoid patients are the most pitiful. They lie in their own filth, muttering incoherently, their minds lost in fever dreams." Pneumonia. The stress of battle, poor nutrition, and exposure to the elements made soldiers particularly susceptible to this lung infection. It was often a secondary infection following other illnesses or injuries. One soldier wrote home, "The coughing never stops here. Day and night, the wards echo with the sound of men fighting for every breath." Malaria. The swampy terrain around the state provided an ideal breeding ground for mosquitoes carrying the malaria parasite. Recurring bouts of fever and chills weakened many patients, making them more susceptible to other diseases. A nurse noted, "The malaria patients shiver violently one moment and burn with fever the next. It's as if their very blood is at war with itself." In an era where germ theory was widely accepted, infection claimed countless lives. Gangrene was particularly feared, often necessitating amputations that, in turn, led to further complications. Dr. Samuel Stout, a Confederate surgeon who visited Columbus during this period, wrote of the challenges in treating infected wounds. The stench of gangrenous wounds was at times almost unbearable. We resorted to every known method to combat the infection, from the application of bromine to the liberal use of whiskey, both internally and externally. But still, we lost far too many men to this insidious enemy. Civil War-era medicine was still primitive by modern standards. Doctors often lacked a basic understanding of sterilization, and anesthesia was in its infancy. The concept of germs as a cause of disease was not yet widely accepted, leading to practices that often spread infection rather than preventing it. For example, surgeons would often move from patient to patient without washing their hands or their instruments, unknowingly spreading bacteria. The reuse of bandages and sponges was common, as was the practice of probing wounds with unwashed fingers to locate bullets or shrapnel. Eliza Harris, a U.S. Sanitary Commission agent and one of the few female nurses working in the Eastern theater of the war at this time, wrote in her journal, "I try to impress upon my colleagues the importance of cleanliness, but old habits die hard. They scoff at my insistence on washing hands between patients, calling it a waste of time when there's so much work to be done." As supplies dwindled, caregivers in Columbus resorted to using corn husks for bandages and sawdust to absorb blood and other fluids. These practices, while well-intentioned, often exacerbated the spread of infection. One Columbus resident recalled in an interview, "We tore up every sheet and tablecloth in the house for bandages. When those ran out, we resorted to using corn husks." The poor boys suffered terribly, but they rarely complained. Their stoicism in the face of such pain was truly remarkable. This shortage of conventional medicines led to increased use of traditional folk remedies. Poultices made from herbs like yarrow and comfrey were applied to wounds, while teas brewed from willow bark, a natural source of salicylic acid, similar to aspirin, were given for pain and fever. Mary Chestnut, a prominent Southern diarist who visited hospitals during this time, wrote, "The ingenuity born of desperation is something to behold. I watched as an elderly black woman applied a poultice of mashed pokeberries to a festering wound. To my astonishment, the angry red began to fade within hours." The experience of serving as a hospital town left an indelible mark on Columbus. Some families lost loved ones to diseases contracted while nursing soldiers. The town's resources were strained to the breaking point, with food shortages becoming common as the burden of feeding thousands of extra mouths took its toll. The emotional impact was equally significant. Many of Columbus's women, like Caroline Seabury, were exposed to suffering and death on a scale they had never have imagined before. Despite the hardships, the citizens of Columbus took pride in their service. The experience fostered a strong tradition of medical care in the town that persists. In the decades following the war, several local hospitals were established with in-house medical training programs, building on the expertise gained during those crucial months of 1862. Dr. James Lipscomb, who founded Columbus's first permanent hospital in 1870, stated at its opening, "The seeds of this institution were planted in the blood-soaked spring of '62. We learned then the value of organized medical care, and we carry that lesson forward today." The transformation of Columbus, Mississippi into a hospital town in the wake of Shiloh and Corinth is a testament to human compassion in the face of overwhelming tragedy. While disease and primitive medical knowledge claimed many lives, the efforts of Columbus citizens undoubtedly saved many more. This chapter in the town's history is a poignant reminder of the horrors of war and the capacity for kindness in even the darkest times. It demonstrates how ordinary people, when faced with extraordinary circumstances, can rise to meet the challenges they never imagined they would face. As one elderly resident, speaking in 1912 on the 50th anniversary of those events, put it, "We were tested by fire, and though we were scorched, we were not consumed. The spirit that saw us through those terrible days lives on in Columbus still. May we never forget the sacrifices made, nor the lessons learned in that crucible of war." I want to thank you for coming on tonight's episode of the Tom Bigby Tales. Until next time.